for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy.
Me
Omilaye.
too. Yes.
Meaning?
She who lives long. Water is life. And just recently I learned that is water that owns the land.
I love that.
Yeah, I do too.
So I'm so happy that you're welcoming me into your paradise space.
Thank you.
I believe that oftentimes paradise spaces come because we're seeking something outside of what we already have. Sometimes that is grief that happens in our lives, and then we decide we start having desires past that circumstance, and we build our own paradises, which for you is nature. I want to go back in time to memory, and then I'm sure we will find some connections throughout our conversation. So the first question I want to ask you is to complete the sentence.
Okay.
I knew what calm was.
I knew what calm
when.
was. I knew what calm was when. I think after my diagnosis with cancer, I think that was when I experienced the most calm, which is fun. It's ironic.
Right after your diagnosis?
Right after my I never experienced calm until then. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Because one would think that getting a diagnosis of any kind would be
heart-wrenching.
So for you to say calm, can you tell me more about that moment of diagnosis and why you felt calm?
So, funny story was that prior to my diagnosis, I want to say 6 months to 8 months, I received the name Omilaye. That's not my birth name. But I received the name Omilaye, which means she who lives long.
Wow.
And I thought it was interesting because I didn't like the name, you know? So I started to develop symptoms. And it was really, really bad. It was a shortness of breath. It felt like, you know what a cat scratches a post? Like they're scratching posts. That's what it felt like internally. I couldn't lift my hands. Like there were things happening to me that I never imagined. But when I got the diagnosis, I was like, finally, this makes sense. This makes sense. Now I could rest because now I know that I'm going to be taken care of. You know, the scariest part was not knowing. But then to finally have the resolve and to have the diagnosis and to have the treatment, it felt like I was going to be okay. Yeah. You know, I think the healing part was communing with the ancestors in between.
In between, before the diagnosis?
So the healing part was the calm. It was after being diagnosed, going through treatment, sleeping, resting in this chaotic phase of my body going through stuff.
Right. After knowing. At this point you know.
At this point I know. At this point I'm actively going through a regimen. I'm experiencing the spiritual life that I didn't know was so full of life. But I felt so calm in it. I felt familial. I felt familiar. It was one of the most interesting and beautiful and wonderful experiences. And that is when I realized what calm was.
So interesting, because first thought when you said I felt calm because I knew I was going to be taken care of, most people would think medically.
No.
Now that they know they can help, they can.
Yeah. That is one aspect to it. That is one aspect
but
to
really
it.
It was an inner knowing that you were being taken care of by higher beings.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, especially through the name. First,
right.
That was the first inclination, was the name. Like, who would think to give me a name like this? You know, like, who would think? And I contested this a lot through the naming ceremony. Like, I think you should do that over. I think there's really something else, you know? Yeah. And that is the name that they stuck with. And to know that through that, even feeling my father's presence, knowing it was going to be okay. Like I never felt him so strongly until then. So I knew.
And your father is an ancestor.
Yes, he is. He's among the ancestors.
Yes. Some people may not know about, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds on it, but the naming ceremony. Was it a communion with the ancestors? What do you all want, you know, this new name to be? How did that name come about?
Right. It's a little bit of that. Culturally, it is, for me, culturally, it's with the Orisha, consulting with Ifa, consulting with the elders, and agreeing that this is a good name, you know, with their permission, granting this person this name. And in hindsight, I should have been more grateful because it is all these things happening. It's like...
Right, all these people are being talked to. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Here's the name we're thinking, but you all have to sign off.
Yeah, and I was so ungrateful, you know, like thinking about it, like, dang, I was really ungrateful. But I see it now. I see the vision that they had. It had a lot to do with nature. It had a lot to do with the aspect of life that flows consistently. Even if my physical body isn't here, my spiritual body will still live, and that's okay. It's the acceptance of that. And I think the physical acceptance was my spiritual acceptance. So to physically accept the name of Omilaye was the spiritual acceptance that this is going to be okay if I release in my physical self.
One who lives long. That could be in your physical body. That could be in the spiritual realm. The fact that you never die.
Yeah.
You may be reborn in different vessels, look different ways, but you never die.
Never die.
Can you tell me about how you found nature, this safe space, this paradise space, and what you were seeking in it?
Yeah. Pre-cancer, I was so scared of nature. Like I didn't want a bug to touch me. Like, oh my God, this is a spider. Oh my God, you know, like I was so scared.
Yeah.
And there was a sudden breaking that happened once the diagnosis came. There was a sudden fearlessness, like I could just walk. I don't care. I could just walk. I could feel the breeze. I could feel something on me and not be paranoid in my physical self. So testing it out, I had a fear of snakes. I had a fear of anything moving.
Right.
I had a fear, just a prominent fear.
Right.
But once you receive horrifying news and you go out into the park and you realize life is happening, whether you're physically there or not, you can enjoy it better. So I started to enjoy the little things. I started to enjoy how things were moving on a tree. I started to wonder what the things were moving on the tree, like where are they going? Like taking that real life curiosity with me, you know, not really venturing into the fear of it, like where's it going? Is it coming next to me? Like, but just leaning into it, you know, this kind of fascination about all life.
Where did that come from? Did that come from now that I am in the physical realm, let me soak it all in? Yeah. Because I don't know how much time I have in the physical realm. Like, where did that newfound fascination come from?
You know, it's interesting because I didn't think about time being on a linear space.
Okay.
I started to accept time as cyclical. And I think one tool that really helped me was Audre Lorde's cancer journals, you know, delving into her life, the way she expressed herself. And in this way, I didn't think first Black women, I didn't think there were narratives around the expression of hurt, pain. So to see her in that way be so vulnerable through an illness was like, wow, okay, let me dig and see where this goes. Traveling from her, I went to Alice Walker, who talks about wisdom being the pause. And And she
Can you
said
say more about that? Wisdom being the pause.
Yeah, wisdom is the pause. From that, she elaborated, you have to take a pause in life, and that is the wisdom. She used illness as an example, because if you don't take a pause, illness will creep in, right? Long story short, I found nature through taking a pause, through just this internal wanting to take a pause and see what I could not see before. Why is the tree so green? I learned about this in school, but to actually be curious about why the tree is so green, you know? And through my understanding and my walk with Buddhism, it taught me that I am connected to the tree, that it is my inner internal self. You know, the way I take care of myself outwardly is the way I would take care of the tree, right, you know? So
you are a garden.
Yeah, so those teachings really help to shape the narrative around my curiosity.
What does communing with the space typically look like outside of, why are those leaves green? You know?
Yeah. So I hear it. I hear it in a specific way. In our culture, we name the elements. You know, the water has a specific name, and you give it a specific chant, and the wind has a specific name, you give it a specific chant. So you're familiarizing yourself through the cultural inclinations, right? But you deepen it through a personal relationship with them. Like you can call on it, you can call on the water, but you actually start to hear it when you sit with it. The longer you sit with it, the more familial it becomes to you. It's talking, it's saying something. And I think the first time I experienced this was, I had a teacher in grad school, and he did this ceremony. And the ceremony was so unusual. It was like, where are we going with this ceremony, Mama? I don't know where we go with this. Anyway, we ended up outside towards this tree. It was a big, thick tree, and the tree started pulsating. It started like
you could see it.
Yeah, it was like you could feel it, you could see it, and you can hear it. It had a sound, and I was like, this is my pre-cancer. Like, oh no, I don't want to.
Wonderland? What is this?
What you mean? The talking? What you mean? But the more we sat with it, the longer I got to understood that it was saying, it's gonna be okay. I got you. I got you. Lean in. If you can't, this is the inner strength that we're talking about here. And it fascinated me so much that I had to see what other trees were talking about. Like, I had to see it. I had to know. Like, it was no longer a fear. It was no longer this things are crawling and it's a ill, you know. It was like, this is beautiful. I didn't realize it could be so beautiful, you know, even through illness. I didn't realize. So
those of us who may not have that connection, that spiritual connection, or that, spiritual outlet to connect nature with God, those of us who just go out for a daily walk, how can we commune with this space in a deep way, even if we don't have that connection to Ifa?
Yeah. So it didn't start out like that with me. It started off like a normal walk. I started to just put one foot in front of the other. And I started to listen deeply to my body, instinctively knowing whether to turn left or whether to turn right. But I have to listen. I have to be obedient to the body first. So Layli Mapayan, she wrote The Womanist Idea. She calls it body knowledge. or she refers to it as a sense of body knowledge. Everyday people have this. We just are not conditioned or socialized to slow down enough to do it. But once we're able to do it, once we take the time, if it's 10 minutes a day, do that, you know? But it started with 10 minutes, going out, slow walks, taking a very, very slow walk, and just listening to what the body is saying. Once you listen to what the body is saying, you can listen to the things that are communicating with the body. You can see that there's certain things that come when you say, I wonder if this is gonna, you know, something happen, and you see a bird just mysteriously land somewhere. And then when you look at the meaning of the bird, it is exactly something that you needed an answer to. So you start to see little things, but you have to carve out that time for rest. And that is a way to reset the body. That is a way to breathe into the body. That is a way to acknowledge the body's knowledge, you know, internally. So,
right. So talk to the space.
Talk to the
Tell
space.
it what you need.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about what inner power you have found from this paradise space?
It's so funny. It's so strange. I feel like I can know exactly what's going to happen before it happens, or I can tell, like, rewrite something. Okay, my example is this. I would say, I don't know why they would put the plant there. And then someone would come minutes later and put the plant somewhere else. It is the weirdest thing. It is the weirdest thing that happens. But I've learned that as long as I'm listening and I say it, I can verbally see the change manifesting in front of me. That is what I learned, is that I do have the power of word. I do have the power to create this space, but I have to be loving to myself. I have to be fair to myself. I have to show myself grace, humility, most of all kindness. So those are words that are not
right.
Those are loaded, and you know, sometimes people are very they take for granted those words because they're thrown around so easily. But once you start practicing it, it becomes a part of you in such a way that you become so tender with it. So yeah, I
feel like as Black women, we are taught that our purpose should be wrapped around how we're servicing others, and I love that how you, even though you notice, okay, this plant needs more water or this soil needs more whatever it is, you know to give that back to yourself. That same level of time and care, you know to give that back to yourself. And that step is so often skipped to the point where we can't give anymore.
Right. It is. It was interesting because Black Girls Survive Cancer has pivoted to looking at rest, looking at.
So let's backtrack just a bit.
Yes.
Because this goes into your purpose.
Yes.
So once you came out, had your own realization that you and nature were meant to be together.
Right.
What came of that? How did you start servicing others?
Right. So my service to others began as a campaign when I was diagnosed 2013. Dealing with grief and how Black women grieve through this cancer process. Like, we don't say anything. We're holding it in. And I wanted to be this, I wanted to use Audre Lorde's work as a continuum. But a lot of her work is around activism, and that's what people notice, but they don't notice the rest. They don't notice the advocacy in rest. They don't notice the advocacy through voice in rest. They don't notice a lot of things. The spiritual activism that she calls active meditation, that was a resounding prominence in a lot of my work with Black Girls Survive Cancer, which started then, and then it progressed into a whole nonprofit now, which I'm so proud of.
Yes.
So Black Girls Survive created this space where we're looking at prevention through nature.
Okay.
We're looking at nature walking, yoga, incorporating yoga with our nature walks, sound bathing. The aspect of that is rest. The mission of that is to rest, is to reset in nature, is to allow our central nervous system, our peripheral nervous system to just become at ease when we see the color green. When we see it, we know we're home. We know we're home to ourselves. We know we're safe. And especially for Black women who been socialized to go, 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 and to not know that it's okay to rest 10 minutes, sitting on a park bench, looking at the green, looking at brown, knowing that it's safe through a tree trunk. It is home, and we're home. We're coming home to ourselves, in such a real way. So
that involves trust, though.
Yeah.
To be able to sit down for 10 minutes and reset.
Yeah.
That means
It does.
everything's going to be okay if I sit here.
Right.
Can you tell me about your relationship with trust?
I didn't have a lot of trust pre-cancer. In my former life, I didn't trust myself. I did not. I had to trust in something greater than me to trust myself. I had to know that the power of the ancestors was greater and stronger. And through that, I learned to live a different life. I learned to live differently. I learned to accept differently. I learned to trust differently.
Right.
And now I trust that. Sometimes I trust those entities more than a physical person. Sometimes I listen to the entities that guide me and say, this is okay. This is a safe space. It's okay. You're here because I'm putting you here. It's all right. It's going to be all right. And to understand, to hear that, and to accept that was the most powerful lesson. Because weeks, months, years later, I understood why.
But months, years later, you're able to put the dots together. Like, oh, that's why I had to get that taken away. That's why that came.
Yeah, it was, the divine always knows. Them relationships you think you want so badly, girl. They know.
Yeah.
This is not for us.
Yeah.
Because you are them and they are you. And the acknowledgement of that is when you begin to trust. When you begin to trust that you are in community with them and not with, you're in community with living people, of course, but you are also in community with spirit.
Right.
And the spiritual aspects around you and the nature around you.
Right.
And when you learn that is community, and how to take care of that community, because that community takes care of you, you know how to be a better person to other people.
Right. And part of nature is that getting away from the everyday hum and getting into the truth.
It is. It is. The thing about nature is that it's not deceptive. It's never deceptive. There are things that are camouflage for protection, but it's never. It's always transparent. It tells you when the seasons are going to change. It morphs into a whole other cyclical process, but it's never deceptive. And the things that are deceptive through camouflaging has a story. It does have a story. But the thing is, you have to lean in to know its story. You have to lean in to want to know its story. Right. Because you're a part of that story too. So,
right. Thank you so much
for
this conversation.
Thank you.
I feel so full.
Yeah.
I feel so at rest in talking to you. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.